The Cleveland Browns' latest signing could signal bigger changes are coming. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer Sherman, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. The Browns signed guard Teven Jenkins, and while it might not seem like it's a major signing, might have bigger ramifications than we actually understand. What does it mean for the Browns draft strategy as well? And Adam Schefter, some of these other notable insiders, they all know nothing when it comes to the Browns' plans at number 2. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast and for making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you will find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends. And, well, it's totally free. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So on Thursday afternoon, the Browns made their latest free agent signing by bringing in former Bears guard Teven Jenkins. And while on the surface, you might sort of see that and be like, okay, yeah, like it's a move that makes some sense. Offensive line is in need, trying to bolster that depth. And you're trying to, get some more players there because it's a group that's always injured and you need some help. It actually might have bigger ramifications than we understand right now. And the reason I say that is because Jenkins is 27 years old. Like, this is not a guy who throughout his career has been more of like a role player. Like, he has generally been somebody who was looking to start. He was a second-round pick of the Bears in 2021, and injuries are the one thing. Like, the one knock on him is the fact that he's had a number of injuries throughout his career. And in fact, his first 3 years in the league, 2021, 22, 23, each of those seasons was derailed in some capacity with a long IR stint that either ended his season, or when he first came to the league, he had back surgery, and that kind of prevented him from playing until late in the season. But last year, he played in 14 games, started all of them. The previous 2 years, he started 11 games in back-to-back seasons. So, like, this is a guy who's likely looking for a job to start. And understanding that, like, he had some offers from other teams. I know Seattle was talking to him. Like, he could have started some other places, but he ends up coming to Cleveland. And so it makes you wonder what was kind of promised to him here, because you have a Browns team that their offensive line is kind of sorted at this point. Now, obviously that can change. There's always injuries. There could be some, and this is what I'm kind of getting at here. Like, there could be some more moves coming, but Joe Bitonio said he's coming back. So in theory, he's your starting left guard. That's where Teven Jenkins generally plays. Wyatt Teller has been sort of locked in for a little bit now. We all, obviously, Wyatt is as far as offensive lineman can be in terms of like popularity. Wyatt is a fan favorite here in Cleveland. He's really embraced Cleveland, and he's been a productive player during his time here in Cleveland. The fact that they're going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense and really like diving into those concepts, it's something that makes you feel like he's going to get back to having success and being dominant the way that he was under Bill Callahan, especially with a Bill Callahan sort of recommendation as coach, as their coach, and Mike Bloomgren as the offensive line coach to sort of help that cause. So this is kind of fascinating because of what it could mean for the Browns down the line here. And if they're going to, if there's going to be a move that sort of follows. And what I mean by that is, like, could you see a Wyatt Teller trade? Right now, Wyatt Teller, if you were to trade him post June 1, you can't trade him right now. Because if you trade him right now, you have no savings. Your dead cap hit skyrockets to $20 million. But if you trade him post June 1, you would save yourself around $6 million this year. And that would give you some more cap space to sort of use later on this summer to make some other moves, do some other things, whatever you want to do with it. or just have it as rollover cap for next year. And there'll be a bigger cap hit because you can divide his dead cap hit into two sort of chunks. So he'll have a $12 million cap hit next year, but it's not it's not a completely far-fetched idea to try to create some more cap space, maybe move off of him. Wyatt Teller's been linked in some trade rumors already at this point throughout his career, the last couple of years in particular. So there's some interesting ripple effects that could come from this, and it makes you wonder where he sort of fits into the picture, Teven Jenkins, that is. Because, and here's the thing, there's a common theme with the offensive line additions the Browns have made to this point in the offseason. Cornelius Lucas, now Teven Jenkins, they both have versatility. Cornelius Lucas is a swing tackle. He can play either side of the offensive line. Teven Jenkins has played tackle throughout his career. He moved to guard. He was right guard, and then he played left guard. Like, he can bounce around and do some different things as well. And so that's where this is also interesting, because like maybe that means they envision him playing a different spot than guard. Maybe they envision him as kicking back out to tackle and playing that position if in a pinch if they need. But it's obvious what the Browns are trying to do here in terms of prioritizing players up front that are versatile, give them opportunities to move guys around, and they aren't just kind of like put in a box as like only being able to do one thing, which, given the injuries that this team has dealt with on the offensive line, that certainly makes some sense to make something that they're prioritizing or something that they want to prioritize, because, man, like it's been bleak at times trying to sort of slot these offensive linemen and having guys have to kick out to spots they're uncomfortable in. If you have players that can do multiple things, that's a huge boost. So I don't know exactly what the role for Teven Jenkins is just yet. I don't know. And these are things that will sort themselves out through the spring. We'll have to keep an eye on where he's playing, where he's lining up. We'll have to keep an eye. Another thing to keep in mind is like Joe Bitonio usually skips a lot of the voluntary stuff. He's usually in the building, but he's like not out on the field. So Jenkins could take a lot of reps, especially in the spring at maybe left guard while Joe Bitonio is not there. And then we'll see what happens. But I find it kind of odd that somebody who could probably go somewhere else and start signs with the Browns, and that it feels like his role would just be as a reserve player and sort of a backup player, unless they view him playing a different spot than we're sort of assuming right now, given that he's been primarily a guard the last couple seasons, and maybe he would play tackle. But there's some interesting conversations to be had around what this means for the Browns up front, what this means for that offensive line and the configuration of it. What does it mean for DeJuan Jones, who's not going to be available during the offseason program, likely coming back from another injury? And, he is also a key cog in all these decisions up front. Is he going to be the person you slot in at left tackle? Or are you going to try Cornelius Lucas to start us at? This is one of the bigger roster building question marks that this team has, is like, what will that left tackle spot look like? And they've added already a number of guys who maybe can serve in that role in a pinch or if needed, or maybe they view one of these guys as starting. And that also adds another level to this that I want to talk about coming up, because if they view one of these other guys as starting, what does that do in terms of the Browns draft plans? I talked this week about the importance of pick 33, not quite as important as pick number 2 overall, but pick 33 is going to be important, because like whatever you don't do at 2, or whatever you maybe do decide to do at 2, it will impact then what you're going to do at 33 to get another player that you're expecting is going to start for you, most likely pretty quickly and almost immediately. So I want to talk about that with you coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives your business flexibility by connecting you with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelancer who can deliver incredible results. Posting a job is free and simple. And within a day, you have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale any business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect you with top talent and grow your business. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Take advantage of the all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can also track your share and you can also track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, so we talked about Teven Jenkins coming to the Browns and that it could mean a bigger move maybe coming for the team in the form of a trade, maybe moving on from Wyatt Teller, whatever it might be later this summer. Those are things that we'll have to see how things play out in the building over the next couple months, starting with the offseason program in April. And it will be interesting to monitor that. But I also wonder what the Teven Jenkins signings does in terms of the Browns draft plans. And what I mean by that is simply like, we know whatever they're going to do at number 2. Maybe you think they're going to take a quarterback. Okay. I did my mock draft on Monday. We'll do another one next week where I sort of mapped out, okay, they take Cam Ward. He was there. And then I took an offensive lineman and Josh Connolly Jr. to sort of give him some upfront help, give him that left tackle spot is so important on an offensive line. So here you're taking care of your quarterback that you just spent a top draft pick on. And so I think like what they do at 33 is what's going to be fascinating to me, because there are so many avenues that you can take, whether you take a quarterback at 2 or not. Like, you can go running back, you can go receiver, you could go offensive line, you could go defensive line. Like, there's, after you get the quarterback situation out of the way, and if they don't go quarterback, maybe that means two then becomes really important, because that might be the pick that you use on a quarterback. So what they do with the second pick is going to be sort of fascinating to me. And I've talked about that already this week, but like this throws a wrinkle into things as well, because whatever your plan is for Jenkins and whatever your plan is to have this offensive line sort of pieced together could impact whether or not you actually prioritize offensive tackle or offensive line as highly in the draft this year. So I'm fascinated by this move, because if you view Jenkins as a starter somewhere on your offensive line, and maybe it is left tackle with the hope that, next year you move into left guard once Joel Bitonio maybe retires, right? That could be what the thought process is. I don't know. If you have a good, but again, like these are questions that they'll have to answer later, but maybe that means the Browns are going to sort of, I don't want to say piecemeal this thing together, because I do think the additions they've made have been smart. I think they've made really practical moves so far this offseason, given the salary cap restraints that they have. I think Andrew Berry's gone about things in a very smart way and addressed some key needs for this team. And because keep your eye on the ball here a little bit. Like they have addressed defensive line. They signed Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. They signed Malik Collins to replace Dalvin Tomlinson. Maybe there's still room to draft somebody on the defensive front. I would imagine they will, because this is a very deep defensive line class. So there, you can find talent even in some of the later rounds potentially at that position. So I do think that will happen. But like, they've done that. They've prioritized offensive line. They've and obviously quarterback remains something that they're sort of using a bunch of different avenues for. They met with Russell Wilson, still waiting for a decision from him. We're now into a week a week after he met with the Browns. So there's still a lot that has to play out there. But like the things they're prioritizing right now is important, because that sort of gives you a signal of the things that maybe the things that they aren't prioritizing now are basically the things that you're sort of saving for the draft. It feels like that's generally how these things would work. Now that doesn't mean they still can't like sign Nick Chubb and that running back isn't still a priority, or they can't do something along those lines. They can't add a receiver in free agency that's like, a different tier than, like, given that we're a week in and you're sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel for wide receivers right now in this market. Like, that doesn't mean you can't still add a guy and then later still draft a guy. Like, I could certainly see that happening. A lot of teams do stuff like that. So there still is a possibility for something like that to play out. And it very well might. But like those they have largely stayed away from receivers, running backs, the skill position players to this point. And so it sort of gives you a hint as to maybe where their heads are at. Hey, we're going to address some of those positions in the draft, and we're going to right now focus on the meat and potatoes of what we need in free agency and try to make some smart additions with what we're able to do salary cap wise. That's signing a Malik Collins. That's signing a Cornelius Lucas. That's signing a Teven Jenkins, who theoretically could start with you for you on the offensive line. So these moves are interesting, and it's about sort of the dominoing effect from these things. And yeah, like maybe the plan on offensive line is to bring somebody like Teven Jenkins in and say, like I said, you're going to play left tackle for now, and then we'll sort of, we'll get the opportunity to maybe move you inside at some point, or Joe Bitonio retires. Yeah, we'll have you back next year. We'll do it again. And so I think like I could see where the Browns are sort of trying to make the offensive line work with maybe what they have already on the team, and also being able to, while also sort of being able to figure out, what is the best combination of guys that sort of fit there. I also think going back to Kevin Stefanski's offense is an important note here, because there's something to be said for like this team feeling pretty good about the idea that like their offensive line is going to be better in that system. And if they can just figure out the offensive tackle spot, the left tackle spot for a year, maybe then they address that down the line. Like it's impossible to get a top flight player given the Browns' current situation and in the draft at every single position of need. So maybe this is a position group that they're looking at and saying, how can we make this thing work this year? And then maybe prioritize finding a left tackle the future down the line. And they've added players that maybe make some sense at some of these spots that you could slot in there, or at least that they're going to let compete for the job and see who maybe wins it by the time training camp rolls around and the start of the regular season rolls around. And then, you sort of you're off and running like that. And like I said, I do think there's something to be said for Stefanski's offense being a system that they feel like going back to this is going to benefit our offensive line as a whole. And so maybe they're not that left tackle isn't important to find, but that maybe they're like, we can find somebody suitable enough for this year to still make this offensive line have success and allow our offense to be more successful. And I mean, it's not hard to look better than last year's offense, obviously. So I think that, like, again, the moves they made at this point are good. I'm already sort of looking ahead as to like what these signings, Jenkins, Lucas, etc., mean for left tackle and mean for the Browns like priority list come draft time. And it's starting to feel more and more, not to say like this has changed their plans drastically, because they still know left tackle's a need. And you do have to plan for the future. So without some of these guys, Wyatt Teller's on the other side of 30, Jack Conklin, after the reworked contract, is going to be a free agent next year. So you got to think about that. Obviously, Joe Bitonio could retire. So this offensive line is bound to look a lot different in 2026. So you do have to sort of plan ahead in that way. But if your goal right now is just like, let's keep this group together, we feel good about going back to the system that works for them, that they played their best in, and let's add some pieces that can do different things, I can see where that's a pretty, understandable strategy. And then maybe they prioritize more of the skill positions come NFL draft time. So the impact of these moves on what the team's going to do in the draft, I think is something to keep an eye on. And that's what I was trying to sort of explore here with you on today's episode. Now, speaking of the number 2 overall pick, Adam Schefter had some comments this week about the Browns wanting Cam Ward above the other quarterbacks, which makes some sense. But it's the latest example of why just and there's been some others this week that I'll highlight. Nobody has a clue when it comes to what the Browns are doing at number 2. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, so Adam Schefter has gone back and forth in a number of different shows or opportunities to speak where he's talked about what he thinks the Browns are going to do. And I don't know, I think it was maybe leading into the combine back in February. He sat there and said, the Browns are taking a quarterback, and I know. And I came on this podcast and I said, I don't know that we can take anything that anybody is saying in February at face value as fact. Because I just don't like that point. Teams are still going through their evaluations. There hasn't been the combine. There hasn't been any medical evaluations. There hasn't been any pro days. Like there's still pieces of information missing from the puzzle that is evaluating these players and figuring out what you need and what you want and what you like. And so I wrote it off then. And then after the combine, you get Schefter basically saying that now he's not sure if the Browns are going to take a quarterback. And now he's coming out and saying that the Browns want Cam Ward. Now, I do think the Browns would like Cam Ward. I think all these teams that need a quarterback want to have the opportunity to draft Cam Ward. It's just a matter of if the Titans are willing to move off the pick or if they're going to ride it out with Cam Ward themselves. So that's the big sort of hold up there. Now, what I think is interesting is, and I'm singling out Schefter here, but it's not just Schefter. It's everybody. It's all these insiders who, are trying to give information the best they can. But I've said this before. The Browns are really haven't given anything away. And they deserve credit for that. They've kept their sort of strategy close to the vest. They've floated some things that have suggested certain things, but they've leaned or suggested multiple directions they could go that has thrown everybody off the scent, it seems. And so Schefter's comments aren't the only ones, because you had Mel Kiper, for example, also from ESPN, draft expert. He goes on and talks about how Shedeur Sanders is his number one quarterback, which is, a contrarian take in a way, because everyone else is leaning Cam Ward as the best quarterback in this class. But he loves Shedeur Sanders. But then in his latest mock draft, after Cam Ward goes 1, he has the Browns taking Abdul Carter. So if he's the best quarterback in the class, why are the Browns taking Abdul Carter? I'm confused. But he was still on the board, but the Browns go Abdul Carter? So is that just like you just don't want the Browns to end up with Shedeur Sanders? I'm confused by that. And then completely similarly, you have his old partner in crime, Todd McShay, who does his own podcast now. He comes out and says he thinks the Browns and the Shedeur Sanders connection and all the tea leaves and all the connecting of the dots that's gone on between those two entities is not for nothing, and it's not a coincidence, and that it's written in the stars that they're going to take Shedeur Sanders. They like Shedeur Sanders, and he's going to be their guy. But then you got Albert Breer saying there's no scouts who grade Shedeur Sanders as as a first round pick that he can find, and so he thinks the Browns are also going to Abdul Carter. So there's so many different takes out there about what the Browns are going to do. And nobody really seems to have a firm answer on it's this or it's this, which is honestly kind of abnormal. To an extent, I think we're still sort of figuring out what the Titans are doing too. But I'm having a hard time remembering when we've seen so much variance. Generally going into April, we're getting close here. It's the 21st of March. But generally going into April, you start to see a lot more consensus on yeah, I feel good about this team doing this thing near the top of the draft. Obviously, further down, there's questions, but near the top of the draft, you start to figure these things out. Last year was different because you knew there was this great class of quarterbacks, and Caleb Williams to the Bears had basically been etched in stone for months at that point. Not months. Yeah, months. I mean, during the offseason, once they had the first pick solidified, it was okay, they're taking Caleb Williams. And you kind of felt like Washington was going to take a quarterback, and it started to make more and more sense that it was going to be Jaden Daniels. And I feel like by this time, you kind of knew that was how things were going to fall, Are you starting to get a sense of that? Now, I know some teams want to trade up, maybe the Patriots, maybe we know the Giants tried to call about trading up to get Jaden Daniels. But so there were some other things on the table, yes, but you kind of had a more clarity on that. There seems to be no clarity there seems to be a little clarity in that, like, Cam Ward's going to be the first overall pick. Just it depends on who. And it sounds like there's more and more consensus that the Titans are going to be the team that takes him. But we have no clarity on what the Browns are doing. And there's so much variance from person to person, mock draft to mock draft on Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, quarterback. Shedeur Sanders isn't good enough, but for me, he is good enough. So I'm going to have him go number 2. And it's so fascinating. And that's why, honestly, like, if you're somebody who's saying stay away from these quarterbacks at this point, I'm at a point right now, and I said it last week, I'm comfortable with either. I'm good with Cam Ward because I think he's the best in the class, obviously. I'm good with Shedeur Sanders. And this isn't just like me talking myself into him. Going back and watching the tape, like, I think he can be successful in the NFL. And everyone keeps comparing him to Bo Nix. Here's the other problem I have. Everyone keeps comparing him to Bo Nix. And they keep saying, like, if he's Bo Nix. And so nobody really has this first round of evaluation on him. Bo Nix still went in the first round, though. That's my problem. Like, he still went in the first round. Yes, it was in the teens, and so maybe that makes more sense, but you always overdraft quarterbacks. So even if you thought Bo Nix was a second-round pick, he still went in the first round, and guess what? He turned out okay. He took the Broncos to the playoffs last year, and so that's why I'm okay with either, as I've explained already. I'm good with Cam Ward. I'm good with Shedeur Sanders. I think his skill set works in Stefanski's offense. I think his skill set will work in the NFL, even though, yes, he lacks maybe the arm strength that everyone's bringing up. Guess what? In 4 years, arm strength won't matter if he's panning out as a quarterback because the Browns are going to play in a dome. Yes, there'll be some weather cities they still go to, but they'll be in a dome. So it largely will be a moot point, at least for home games. And so fine. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm good with either, and I didn't mean for this to turn into like a rant about both the quarterbacks in this year's class and why I'm good with them again. But I'm okay with either at this point. So for me, yes, if they take Shedeur Sanders to 2, I get it. If they take Cam Ward, I obviously get it even more. He's the best in the class. If they take, but I also don't blame fans who are a little weary of one of these quarterbacks, or they've done their own evaluation or read enough from the experts and feel like they're just not worth it. And so I take Abdul Carter. If that's how you feel, I respect it. I get it. I understand where there's some, this isn't the best quarterback class. This isn't last year's quarterback class, certainly. And so if you're worried about them getting it wrong, or you're worried about it not panning out, yes, with the number 2 pick, you want to get a premier player, and you want to get somebody who's going to change your franchise. I think either of these quarterbacks could do that, but I understand where, like, Abdul Carter also makes a lot of sense and could do that. So if you're weary of the quarterbacks, fine. I can live with Abdul Carter if that's what the pick's going to be. But my larger point on all of this is just that, like, nobody has any clue where the Browns are going at this point, and that works in their favor. They have done a very good job of sort of disguising where their head's at, what they think, where they want to go. And so they deserve credit for sort of keeping their cards hidden in this game of poker that is NFL draft season. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. We'll have plenty more for you next week, maybe over the weekend. We'll see if these quarterbacks start to make decisions on where they're going to end up and where they're going to go. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out Locked On NFL Draft, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy some college basketball because I know that's what everybody's watching. Peace.